This audio review is just a quick overview of the objectives for the first exam, and more or less what the questions are asking and what, in general, the answers I'm looking for are. Obviously, the more detailed explanations of these can be found in the videos, and you should be seeing little clips of the appropriate videos and images from the interactive activities as we go through this. The first objective simply asks you to match the three groups given to their approximate number of species. We'll go into them in greater detail later, and to recognize that bacteria are the most abundant organisms on Earth. You should know the difference between hypothesis and theory, as we had gone through in how science works, and also be able to distinguish between definitions or examples of dependent and independent variables. If I gave you, a sentence-long description of a study, you should be able to identify what was the dependent and independent variable in this study. We had approached the process of science in the Rabbit Island study, and so you should be able to answer a couple of questions about that, just basically on its conclusions or on the different groups. If I give you one of the graphs from the study, the one with the three rabbits and lines which indicated their survivorship, that you could answer questions about what each group then showed. There was an activity titled Designing Studies, and it covered some of the things that a good study would include, such as having dependent and independent variables, which other variables were controlled, the difference in the treatments between the two experimental groups, how a dependent variable is measured, the replication of the procedure, etc. And so then if I give you an example of a study which includes these factors, that you could then be asked, oh, so in this study, how were other variables controlled? How was it replicated? What was the dependent and independent variable, etc., just like you saw in the activity. In the interactive assignments which you had on classification, a number of points were made which could come out on the exam. So, for example, if you were given an image from the dog or bear classifications, that you could be able to identify which organisms share a more recent common ancestor or those which share more distant common ancestors. You should be able to place the levels of classification in order from smallest to largest, and so they are given in the objective: subspecies, species, genus, tribe, family, order, class, kingdom. And recognize that when you hear something like, Canis lupus, the scientific name for the wolf, or Homo sapiens, or Canis latrans, the coyote, etc., that you recognize that the first term is the genus name, the second term is the species name. There was a classification activity which you were given where you looked at a bunch of critters and came up with a grouping. Well, if I took images from those same critters and say gave you 5 of them, I could ask you to group them based on traits and then develop a cladogram based on this. And so you might want to review that activity prior to the exam.